Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
During our Farm Basics time today, we wanted to discuss pre-harvest intervals. What does a pre-harvest interval mean? What is that?
Well, what that means is you have to spray a certain pesticide so many days before harvest, so there isn't any residue left of it in the grain. Like for example in wheat. If you're spraying wheat, you know what? You don't want to have any residual herbicide or insecticide in that wheat. So like right now, we're ready to harvest this field, but we've got some bugs out there. All of a sudden grasshoppers are coming in. Well, wow, we should kill those grasshoppers off. Well, no, we can't, because we're going to harvest in 2 days. There's no product that we can spray right now. Well, there are a few, but realistically, there's no product we're going to spray right now that's going to help our wheat out, because we're going to harvest it in 2 days.
So what this pre-harvest interval thing comes down to is it's about protection for consumers in the end, because eventually a lot of the crops that we're producing on the farm across the country and across the world, they're going to get consumed by either livestock or human beings, and we just want to make sure that they're safe. So that's the reason why the government will come out with pre-harvest intervals. Now, how does the government decide that, well, with this insecticide it's 21 days and this other insecticide it's 28 days? How do they know?
Well, you know, there has to be a lot of testing done, and when you think about that, who should do that testing and who should pay for it? Well, it's the chemical company that wants to sell that insecticide, Brian, that's going to have to pay for that. So let's say, for example, that a chemical company says, you know what, we need to be able to spray right up to 7 days before harvest because there's some, mysterious insect now that comes right before harvest and eats all the wheat. Well, if you're going to do that, you're going to have to do a tremendous amount of testing. You're going to have some crop that they're going to destruct. They're going to spray it 7 days before and try and prove that there isn't any residue in that wheat. And if they can prove that, hey, you know what, without a doubt, we're going to spray it 7 days before and it'll be completely gone before it gets harvested, then they'll get a 7-day pre-harvest interval. But with most chemical companies, they say, look, realistically, no farmer is going to spray 7 days before harvesting wheat. They're going to spray at least a month before. So they do all their testing at a month before harvest, and that's where they get their date. So just because it says 28 days or 21 days, does that mean that it couldn't potentially be safer to do it even closer to harvest? Well, no, not necessarily. It just may mean that the chemical company hasn't done the testing to prove that.
And if a chemical company is going to get a narrow pre-harvest interval, like let's say 24 or 48 hours, because there are some insecticides even that are labeled to spray on certain crops where it's 24 to 48 hours and you can harvest that crop and then eat it immediately. Okay, well, why shouldn't it be that way with every crop then? Well, what it comes down to is when they have the narrow time window for a pre-harvest interval, they have to run a lot more tests, because the government's going to say, okay, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense that it's only 24 hours, so we want to see ample data for this, and it might cost that chemical company several million more dollars to do that. So that's where the company says, well, are we really going to sell that much product on that particular crop, or should we just label it, like Darren said, 28 or 21 days out?
Well, okay, let's just take tomatoes, for example, Brian. Yep. If you're going to eat a tomato and you're going to go to the grocery store and you're going to buy a tomato and it's got all these wounds on the outside of it from a bug that chewed on it, are you going to be excited about buying that tomato?
Nope, I'm not going to buy it. It's going to sit there.
Well, guess what? If I'm a tomato producer, I'm going to say, you know what? I can't have a bug come out 2 days before harvest. I need an insecticide that I can spray safely, and then I know a human is going to consume this tomato probably in a couple of days. So there has to be some products in those cases where you have kind of a narrow window for a pre-harvest interval. Otherwise, you just aren't going to have an edible product at the end. Now, if you've got something like wheat, that's a whole different story. This wheat right here is going to get fed to livestock. Well, if you're feeding it to livestock, is a cow going to really care if there's a little bit of a scar here and there on a couple of kernels? Probably not as big a deal.
Once again, a pre-harvest interval determines the number of days that a farmer has to wait from spraying a product to actually harvesting that particular crop, and it really varies depending on what product the farmer is using and the crop that he is using it on.
Well, a farmer may be out using some product to control our weed of the week. Can you identify this week's weed?